Princess Catherine just pushed aside a carefully polished palace script and did something the royal family rarely allows. Looking directly at the cameras, she tore down the silent walls surrounding Prince Louis's private, terrifying recovery journey. For months, sudden absences and shifting schedules sparked rampant rumors. But the actual truth behind closed doors at Windsor Castle was far more heartbreaking than anyone realized. Today, we finally uncover the secret battle that changed the British monarchy forever. The secret illness that forced William to alter his royal duties. Now, to truly understand what unfolded behind the impenetrable gates of the royal estates, we must rewind to when the palace's carefully constructed narrative began to fracture. Prince Louis had been recovering from complications related to what the family initially believed was a standard, serious respiratory illness. This type of diagnosis typically comes with a predictable timeline. The medical staff at Windsor treated it as an ordinary seasonal infection, the kind young children often navigate during the damp, chilly British winter. However, it soon became clear that the situation was entirely different. The bone-deep fatigue was not going away. The first true alarm bell rang during a quiet morning breakfast. In the private family dining room, usually filled with the chaotic, joyful energy of three young children preparing for their day, Louis sat unusually still. He pushed away his plate without uttering a single word. When Prince William gently asked what was wrong, his youngest son pointed to his chest with a small finger and whispered that he felt far too tired to eat. This uncharacteristic moment of defeat from a child famed for his boundless energy sent a chill through the household. The real turning point, which Princess Catherine later described as the absolute point of no return, happened a few days later during a private rehearsal at Windsor. This particular gathering was meant to be a gentle, low-pressure return for Louis, a practice run before a formal royal appearance. It was designed as a controlled environment where the family could prepare without the crushing weight of crowds, camera flashes, or public expectations. Midway through the morning, however, Louis suddenly stopped walking. He reached out, desperately grasping for his mother's hand, and whispered with frightened urgency that he couldn't catch his breath. Catherine dropped to her knees beside him immediately, her formal composure breaking. She wrapped her hands around his small fingers and felt a shock of fear when she realized how incredibly cold they had become, despite the room's intense heat. William's reaction was instantaneous and fiercely protective. He abandoned all protocol, clearing everyone except the emergency medical team out of the space within seconds. He personally took control, arranging for Prince George and Princess Charlotte to be escorted to a distant, secure wing of the vast residence. He absolutely refused to let either of his older children witness their youngest brother struggling for air. That moment fundamentally changed everything inside the household. Here is where the massive contradiction began to emerge between what the royal family projected to the public and what was deteriorating behind closed doors. William laid down a clear mandate. Every public engagement involving Louis was to be suspended immediately. As a father who had grown up under the relentless media spotlight, he firmly believed that missing a ceremonial obligation mattered infinitely less than allowing his son's precarious condition to worsen under public scrutiny. From a human perspective, that protective instinct is difficult to argue against. However, senior palace aides, whose careers revolve around maintaining the illusion of a flawless monarchy, warned that these repeated, unexplained absences would inevitably attract dangerous questions. In the rigid, traditional terms of the royal institution, an engagement is a sacred duty carried out on behalf of the crown. When a prominent member of the royal family, even the youngest prince, stops appearing without a medical bulletin, the public takes notice and the press begins to dig. The advisors desperately wanted to release a controlled, vague explanation before wild speculation filled the silence. They drafted statements filled with standard institutional phrasing, but William categorically refused to authorize them. He stated flatly that he would not allow his son's frightening recovery to become a public narrative while the child was still physically vulnerable and emotionally uncertain. He built a wall of total silence to protect his family. Why Catherine rejected the palace draft and decided to speak out now? The issue of absolute silence within a family that is part of the public eye is deeply complicated. This silence not only shielded Prince Louis from the intrusive gaze of paparazzi, but also began to create a suffocating atmosphere that affected the entire household in ways his parents didn't fully understand at first. The protective bubble that William imposed was gradually turning into an isolating vacuum, and Catherine was the first to recognize the psychological toll it was taking. The breaking point came late one evening, long after the children had been carefully tucked into bed. The heavy mahogany desk in William's private study held a meticulously polished draft prepared by the Royal Communications team. For those unfamiliar with the workings of the monarchy, a palace-approved statement is a highly sanitized document, vetted by multiple tiers of royal advisors, legal experts, and communication secretaries before it reaches the public. It is specifically designed to protect privacy, project stability, and avoid any hint of human vulnerability or confusion. However, as Catherine sat alone under the low light of a desk lamp, reading the carefully crafted sentences, the words felt utterly empty. The official statement described a vague medical recovery without acknowledging the sheer terror the family had experienced. It mentioned standard, gradual progress without revealing any of the genuine fears they had faced during those dark, harrowing nights. Most importantly, the polished language contained no trace of the brave, frightened little boy who had nearly lost all confidence in himself. When William entered the room, Catherine placed her handwritten notes directly on top of the official palace document. The ensuing argument was not fueled by anger, but by the exhausting terror that only parents who have witnessed a child suffer can truly understand. William read her honest, vulnerable opening line and immediately shook his head. He reminded her vehemently that a public statement about their child's health could be replayed, analyzed, dissected, and remembered by the press long after their son had recovered. He asked her, his voice rising with defensive fear, whether she was ready to see their young child's private medical journey debated on morning television by people who had never met him. The anger in his voice was a direct manifestation of his helplessness, and both of them recognized it all too well. However, Catherine refused to back down. She looked William in the eye and delivered a devastating truth that shattered his resistance. She explained that their intense protection had backfired. Because the family went to such extreme lengths to hide Louis's condition, he had tragically started to believe that his illness was something deeply shameful. He thought he was being hidden away because he was broken and no longer the perfectly energetic royal child the public expected him to be. This heartbreaking reality changed everything about their narrative. Catherine then pushed the lifeless official draft off the desk and pointed out that their silence was no longer acting as a shield. It was actively damaging their son's spirit. Moreover, she revealed something that truly broke through William's long-standing royal defenses. Louis, despite his young age, had quietly made his own request. He wanted to thank the dedicated medical professionals who had held his hand and made him feel safe when he struggled to breathe. He wanted the world to know that he hadn't just vanished. Most heartbreakingly, he did not want the public to think he had disappeared out of a lack of courage to face them. Upon hearing this, William physically collapsed into his chair. He covered his face with his hands for a long, heavy moment and admitted a profound truth. His relentless push for a total media blackout had stemmed not only from a desire for privacy, but also from his deeply rooted fear of losing control of his family's narrative to the press. This was a remarkable admission from a future king trained his entire life to maintain absolute emotional composure. In that quiet room, the Prince and Princess of Wales reached a new understanding. Catherine would speak directly to the public, bypassing the traditional press release. She would fiercely protect specific medical details, but she would candidly acknowledge the emotional seriousness of their journey. How George and Charlotte secretly protected their brother at Windsor. While the adults were busy dealing with the politics of the monarchy and fighting over press releases, something very important and stressful was happening with the younger generation. The silence Prince William enforced was not only impacting the public, but also affecting Prince George and Princess Charlotte. Children, especially those growing up in a royal home, pick up on anxiety, even when it's unspoken. As the eldest child and future heir to the throne, Prince George felt he had to stay calm. At a young age, he started to grasp the heavy expectations on him. He saw his parents' tense faces and heard whispered conversations, so he tried to be strong for everyone around him. He acted stoically, hiding his own fears to avoid adding to his mother's stress. But eventually, he broke down. One night, as his father tucked him in, George quietly asked if his younger brother could become seriously ill without anyone outside the family knowing. His question showed he was truly worried that their silence meant they were in danger. Princess Charlotte reacted differently. She noticed every closed door, restricted hallway, and lowered voice among the staff. She understood the seriousness of their situation better than anyone explained to her. Instead of going silent like George, Charlotte became an emotional support for Louis. Every morning before heading to school, she left small jokes and colorful drawings by his pillow. She realized that laughter brought back moments of joy for her brother. However, the outside world began to intrude on their safe home. When Charlotte overheard staff talking about the growing media attention surrounding her family's absence, she went to Catherine right away. With determination, she asked her mother if strangers were worried about Louis. Then, showing her caring nature, she asked if Louis would have to face public questions. These are not the kinds of scary questions young children should have to deal with alone. Catherine carried a heavy, emotional burden. She reassured Charlotte that recovery takes time, while hiding her own exhaustion. She kept her deepest fears to herself to protect William, who was doing the same for her. Their love for their children remained strong, but their tiredness turned their kindness into a tense silence that filled Windsor. In the middle of this emotional turmoil was young Prince Louis. Although he was too young to understand royal rules fully, he could see the fear in the faces of those who cared for him. He was usually the cheerful child who brought energy and laughter into quiet, formal spaces. As the youngest prince, he was expected to do less, but he was essential to the family's sense of normalcy. That is why his sudden fatigue worried his siblings so much. The private conversation where King Charles blessed the honest truth. After William and Catherine finally reached an emotional breakthrough and agreed on a public statement, there was still one major challenge to face: King Charles's approval. He received Catherine's personal draft late in the evening after meeting with his advisors. Realizing the document's sensitive nature, he sent his advisors away and read it alone in his study at Buckingham Palace. He read the handwritten pages twice. When he reached the line about his grandson feeling ashamed of the family's privacy, he took off his reading glasses and set them down heavily. The words troubled him. Charles has always been driven by royal duty, which teaches emotional restraint from a young age. In that moment, he understood that while Louis was protected from media scrutiny, this protection had made the boy feel invisible and unworthy. When William arrived soon after to defend the statement, Charles pushed aside the usual formalities. He asked him one important question: would this emotional statement truly help Prince Louis, or was it just a way to ease the fears of the adults around him? William stood firm in defending Catherine's judgment, but admitted that once the raw statement aired on television and social media, the royal family would lose control of the narrative. Reporters would start digging into family history, absences, and medical decisions, searching for details that the family had chosen to keep quiet. To guard against this risk, palace communication officials prepared a safer, less personal version of Catherine's statement. While polite, it denied Louis the chance to thank his medical staff. Charles looked at this version and rejected it. He believed that a statement lacking the child's personal touch would protect the monarchy, but fail Louis. The king approved Catherine's unedited message, but added one condition. Prince Louis had to hear the statement first and understand what information would be shared with the public. The next morning, Catherine sat on Louis's bed and read the final version to him. He listened seriously for a child his age. When she finished, he made a significant correction. He insisted that he wanted everyone to know he was getting strong again, not just doing better. Catherine struck through the words and changed them immediately. When the revised script went back to the king, Charles approved it with a handwritten note in the margin that read, "Truth delivered with restraint could protect the crown more honestly than silence." The emotional return that proved the monarchy was stronger than ever. Catherine shared an important message with the world after getting the king's blessing. She spoke directly into the camera, calmly thanking the medical teams who helped Louis during his illness. She also announced that her youngest son was getting stronger. The response from the public was immediate and overwhelming. Palace phones rang off the hook, major news networks aired breaking headlines, and millions of supportive messages flooded the royal social media accounts. Some broadcasters, however, began comparing older videos of the family with Catherine's new message. One commentator even zoomed in on a video showing Louis looking tired. Watching this in his sitting room, William quickly turned off the TV and told his staff that his son's recovery would not be cheap entertainment. Outside the royal grounds, something unexpected and heartfelt was happening. Families began visiting Windsor Castle. Instead of leaving typical floral tributes, they placed hundreds of colorful blue stars on the barriers. Each star carried the same hopeful message from Louis: getting strong again. The blue stars quickly covered the castle gates. Each one had a personal message for Louis, or for another child facing medical challenges. Windsor Castle, known for its grand events and national mourning, now held something different. It was a quiet display of support showing how deeply one family's fear connected with many others. A major newspaper chose to feature Catherine's strong expression on its front page, avoiding sensationalism. Under her photo, it simply said, a mother's voice. A smaller line repeated Louis's message about getting strong again. This was important because it showed the young prince not as weak, but as brave in his recovery. It highlighted a mother's love and courage above the usual royal drama. The key moment that truly mattered did not occur in a brightly lit press room or before a global audience. It happened quietly when Prince William entered the family's private garden room and found Louis sitting on the floor. This was the first moment Louis was free from the anxious doctors and worried adults around him. Instead of sitting in a chair, William chose to sit on the carpet to connect with his young son. He looked at Louis and asked how he felt now that everyone knew the truth. Louis took a moment to respond. He mentioned that he had noticed his father stop talking about exciting royal events whenever he was in the room. During Louis's difficult recovery, those joyful conversations completely disappeared. Because of this silence, Louis started to believe that everyone thought he would never be healthy enough to join royal events again. William had made this choice to protect Louis from pressure, but it made Louis feel excluded from his family's future. Then, Louis shared something that broke his father's heart. He confessed that during his toughest week, he heard his father crying outside his bedroom door. Louis pretended to be asleep because he did not know how to comfort him. This confession shattered the strong facade William had maintained for months. William pulled his son close and tearfully told him that true bravery means admitting your fears and speaking the truth, even when it's easier to stay silent. When Louis returned to the public for the first time, it wasn't on the grand balcony of Buckingham Palace. It was at a small family gathering for a local children's project. There was no press coverage, formal speech, or pressure for him to perform perfectly. As they arrived, Louis paused at the entrance, unsure about going inside. Princess Charlotte reached out and took his hand. Prince George took the other hand. Princess Catherine stood behind them, waiting patiently for Louis to decide when to enter. Then, the three siblings walked in together. Princess Catherine spoke up to make sure Louis would never feel ashamed about his medical struggles. As Louis walked bravely between George and Charlotte, he did not need to be carried or rushed. The fear that had clouded their family for months no longer controlled them. This difficult chapter was finally over. Before we wrap up, if you want to stay updated on royal family news as it develops, make sure to subscribe to Vintage Exposé so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.